need to see you a certain way.
She was certainly popular. In 1899, the Boston Globe called her society's high priestess.
Wow.
And then the Chicago Tribune ran an article in 1896 stating that she might as well be the leader of society and that nothing stands in her way since Mrs. Astor has paved the way for her. So,
Mrs. Astor meaning...
Caroline Astor.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
The
Mrs. Astor.
Yeah. So Ava did take up the mantle of her mother-in-law by joining 10 other prominent society women to keep out the undesirables, because that's very important. The Chicago Tribune claimed that there were 5,000 names on the list that was kept by these women, and that these people, I guess it sounded like in the U.S., that were worth socializing with.
Okay. Did they also have a blacklist, or they would only invite people from the 5,000 list?
Right. It's only on the social
if
register.
You weren't on, but did you have to be replaced? Like, could there only be a certain amount of people that you were allowed to invite, or did it keep adding to, or was it like a...
No, I think it was pretty,
Could you get kicked off?
Possibly. It's a good question. Actually, yeah, I would imagine you can, because on top of all this, the women took their war a step further by declaring that public balls, including the Patriarch's Ball, were vulgar. So the Patriarch's Ball was a very...
Is that like the fish one?
No, the fish one was crazy. But the Patriarch's Ball had been around for probably 20 years. And in order to get invited to it, you had to be personally invited by one of the patriarchs. And it was like maybe 20 of them.
What is that? Like a Carnegie, Astor, Vanderbilt? Like,
yeah,
that a family?
They had to be men, and it had to be like men of like the high order. And then you could only come if you were personally invited by them.
I can't imagine.
Yeah,
that just sounds stressful.
I know, right? So this is an invitation-only party, but it was held publicly, so the women kind of took aim at it and said, this is vulgar. So they turned their backs on it, actually called it out, and so the ball and the whole organization folded as a result of all this.
Oh my gosh.
So they clearly had a lot of power.
Yeah. And
the Tribune also claimed that even though there were 10 women in this group, 3 controlled it, and one of those 3 was Ava. So it's like the mafia, I think. It's like, these are the 3 mafia dons, and they're going to take you out.
Being a lady mafia sounds kind of fun.
Yeah, I know, right? And I thought I was like really sad, and I probably shouldn't actually admit this in public, but I love Gossip Girl. But there's like this whole thing that all the girls who go to really high-end school, like Chapin and whoever leads society within those schools, they're like the dons of society.
I'm just glad I wasn't popular. I was
right?
In band, and I didn't have to deal with any of that.
And I like screwed with people. I ran vice president my senior year, like student body, and when I did my video, I told everybody I was a communist.
You did not.
I did. Yeah.
I cannot see you doing that at all.
I would do lots of random things like decapitate Barbies and hang them upside down in my locker and like leave my locker door open just to like mess with people. I also played a lot of pranks with people. Like, we stole the head cheerleader's megaphone and ransomed it.
I like that. That sounds like a really good prank.
Yeah. And my dad, I remember he called me up that day and was... Because we were going to go deliver the ransom note. He was like, if you don't get arrested, what do you want for dinner? I'm like, hamburger helper. Because hamburger helper was my favorite meal. So
that's funny.
What was the ransom?
Yeah.
We didn't really ransom it, so to speak. We just basically literally made a letter with the magazine, cut out letters that said, do you miss me? And we put a Polaroid of
great.
her megaphone and delivered it to her house. And then we heard along the line that she got in trouble because she didn't have it at that basketball game, so we did take it back.
Did you just have to, like, cup her hands or something?
I guess she did, yeah. One of my friends was a experienced prankster, and she was like, you absolutely do not tell anybody besides the 3 people that you take in on this. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
So nothing was said, and like 6 months down the line, I was listening to 2 girls in my English class, and they were like, yeah, did you hear about that? That was amazing. And I was like,
I might as well say it.
That was me.
Yeah.
And they were like, are you serious? I'm like, yeah, I'm a badass, officially.
I think Ava and Caroline would have let you. 10.
Right.
Yeah.
JJ and Ava went to Europe in March of 1896. And then in October of that same year, I totally, I feel like I uncovered the Holy Grail when I ran across this in the newspaper. One of those aha moments. So the Detroit Free Press reported that Ava had been very ill and the cause was pregnancy. Now this was crazy because like all the things that I've like researched about them, nothing ever said about her, being pregnant during this time. So she had given birth to a child and the baby died the next day.
Oh no.
Now her condition was grave enough for several days following that. In fact, her mother came from Philadelphia to be with her, but she did pull through. According to the papers, the Astors tried to keep the whole thing quiet. But obviously, the story leaked out. So my knee-jerk reaction is to think that it's kind of weird that they were covering this up. But it should be noted that during this time period, sex was considered dirty. So many women would not even be seen out in public once they began showing if they were pregnant.
Well, if the baby died, you wouldn't really want to talk about that because that's pretty tragic.
Yeah, but I would imagine that...
Oh, you think during her pregnancy they would have said something like... This
possibly.
is the next...
Yeah, that...
Or whatever.
Or... It could go either way, I think. Like, she could have kept it covered up that she was pregnant. And I feel like if it leaked out, then they would need to, have a ceremony. It was just really interesting because it didn't actually say, was the baby full term? Was it more of a stillborn type of thing? That kind of thing. So... I just found it was just really interesting, particularly that because the actual newspaper said that they had tried to keep it a secret. I just kind of felt that was strange. Like I said, many women would not be seen out in public once they began showing. Basically up to a month or so to the baby being born, they wouldn't really even leave the house. They could receive close friends and family, but they wouldn't really go out in public. When the child was born, then there would be, a birth announcement.
Sure.
It would be like make a big deal about it.
Yeah.
And we see that when JJ and Ava's son Vincent was born, it was really big news. Even in Salt Lake City, it was big news.
Wow.
This was reported in November of 1891, back when Vincent was born. An Astor heir. A son is born to Mr. and Mrs. John Jacob Astor. The father is happy, having been apprehensive as to the male succession to his estates and the property. A son was born to Mr. and Mrs. John Jacob Astor at 3 a.m. yesterday. It was decided some time ago that if the expected child was a boy, it should bear the famous name of John Jacob, which it didn't. The infant belongs to the 5th generation, which has borne that name in America. There's another Astor of the same generation who bears that same name, but as he is a younger son, the bearing of that title will not conflict with the heir who came into the world yesterday. The other John Jacob of the 5th generation is the second son of William Waldorf Astor.
Who doesn't live in the country.
Right.
So they're still naming their kids not in succession, like how we talked about.
Yeah.
Just gotta stop that. So that's why he's Vincent. Is his first name Vincent?
He's actually William
Vincent.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it has been an open secret to the intimates of William Astor for a long time that he was exceedingly worried about the male succession to the vast estate. Now they're talking about William Backhouse Astor, JJ's father. So that, because he's still alive at this point.
I thought, who is the third? That's his uncle.
Yeah.
Backhouse is his father.
Right. John Jacob Astor III is the uncle. And John Jacob III had William Waldorf.
Okay.
He just totally jumped over that.
The guy that left. Okay.
Did that
Waldorf Astoria.
Right.
Yep.
Yes. So Aaron was asking that if that was William Waldorf who did the Waldorf piece of the hotel, and yes, that's true. He built the Waldorf Hotel. So.
Well, and Waldorf Astoria is Astor, right?
Right. And the Astoria part was JJ.
Oh, okay.
And they connected them.
Okay.
And then they tore it down for
because
the Empire State Building, and then built a whole new Waldorf Astoria.
Waldorf Astoria.
That is there now.
The one that's there now. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So they're not only confusing in their names, they're also confusing in their architecture.
Yes, in their hotels.
Like that Waldorf Astoria is not this Waldorf Astoria.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So John Jacob Astor, father of the babe born yesterday, is William Astor's only son. He has always been delicate, and at the present moment is convalescing from a severe attack of typhoid fever. When looking about for a wife for his son, one of the first considerations which William Astor thought of was that she should come of robust stock. The beautiful Ava Willing of the aristocratic Philadelphia family became the third Mrs. John Jacob Astor. The wedding took place February 17th of the present year.
Wait, she was his third wife?
I think they meant like, because they don't even have it right.
Mrs. John Jacob Astor.
Because he's the fourth John Jacob Astor.
Yeah. Okay, sorry.
I know. It's like, can we confuse this anymore?
That wasn't his,
The willing men have been noted for their splendid health and superb physiques. The Astor baby is strong like the Willings, and if judgment based upon the symptoms of 12 hours is any guide at all, the new heir of the Astors bids fair to grow strong and live long like the Willings. William Astor is supposed to have $150 million. In the case of William Astor, the male succession at one time looked precarious. Like John Jacob, his brother, he too had only one son, and the son was none too robust. The joy, then, of William Astor can readily be imagined when the greatest hope of his life was realized. Not only had a male heir been born, but the doctors announced that the child was ruddy and gave every physical promise that a child just born can give.
Sure. So this was Vincent. And he's very strong and healthy.
Yes.
Okay.
Indeed. And then I found another article that said that they weren't sure exactly what he was going to look like yet, but he hopefully would not get JJ's nose.
Oh, I
like,
thought he was pretty handsome, though.
I know. There was like several things that like talked about how ugly JJ was.
He wasn't.
No, he wasn't ugly. He was dashing, I think. So I find it interesting that all the papers reported on Ava's pregnancy and childbirth allude to the fact that the family tried to keep it secret.
Is that the one you just read?
No, that's later.
Okay. That's what you said. We'll get to it. Okay.
Yeah.
There's a really, spoiler alert, there's a really great headline coming up.
It's coming up, yeah.
That you will have to read multiple times.
Yes, I will, because you'll have to think it through. I just think it's just strange that they kind of hushed this up when it was usually a really big deal.
I agree.
And so the reason I think that this is strange is because of what happens next. In the spring of 1902, so we're flashing through 6 years, JJ rented a cottage in Newport for the season. Now, this was notable because previous to this, he and Ava always stayed with his mother, Caroline, at Beechwood, the Astor family cottage, or with her mother, Alice Willing.
Okay.
Now, even though the papers remarked on it, they seem to think that this was a big plot for Caroline Astor to further push her daughter-in-law into taking over her position in society.
And that's the Mrs. Astor is Caroline at this point.
That's correct.
Okay.
So, by this time, Caroline was pretty up in years and in failing health, so this, of course, made sense that she would be grooming her successor. What I found interesting is that Ava was pregnant at this time while this is all going on.
Like, again?
In 1902, yeah.
Okay.
Right. And so, of course, this is the first, if you miss the fact that she was pregnant in 1896, this is supposedly the first time in 10 years, and several newspapers actually remark upon that.
What do you mean 10? You said it was 6 years later, and Vincent
was born less than 9 months after they got married.
Okay.
So it's been 10 years since he was born.
Okay.
Right. This is just, it's kind of a momentous fact that, she's pregnant again. When they started announcing all this stuff, the summer season was going on. And, I mean, she probably wouldn't have been seen during this time because she would have been
Not if what you said was true, and she's pregnant and in the house. And...
Well, yeah, because the baby was born on July 7th. So, I mean, for, all of the summer season to that point, she's not even probably seen out in public. But the baby was a girl. They didn't have her christened until 5 months later, which I found kind of strange. It was December. They christened her Ava Alice Muriel Astor, and the ceremony was held at Ferncliff, which was the Astor's house in Hudson River Valley.
Because it was still there.
Right.
Okay.
Only the parents and the minister were present.
But wait, what year is this?
This is 1902.
So that's when Astor Courts was begun.
Yeah, just started.
Groundbreaking.
So, yeah.
Okay.
So only the minister and the parents were there. No family, no friends, not even the godparents. And it was just really, really strange. So I think this totally backs up what has been gossiped about in New York society for many, many years.
And it wasn't him.
Right. JJ apparently was not Alice's father.
Not the father.
So many people think that it was a society gentleman who went by the nickname of Patch. So I tried to dig up that name just to see even if I could just pick up on somebody who was nicknamed that.
Sure.
couldn't find anything.
Yeah.
So we'll have to leave his identity
He
to...
could have been like a traveling salesman or